Hey everyone, so this is the pencils process for Guten Tag number 119. So actually, this is a strip that I actually did about 7 years ago or more, and I had done this in one of my sketchbooks after I had finished doing a lot of the Guten Tag episodes that I had done for college from our college newspaper. So this is something I did just in a sketchbook. Actually, on a trip out when I went to go see my brother out in California. Um, and this is just I've been kind of sitting on this idea, and I've never really done anything with it. So I decided I'd do it for this trip. So I'm gonna I updated it a little bit. I just changed some things around, some of the gags around, or some of the lines around. So what I did is I just took my sketchbook and I scanned it into Photoshop, and you can see I had the page there in the artwork, and I had to actually rotate it a little bit to have it line up and be a little bit more square to the page. And the reason I do that is so that when I go and make my thumbnails, it's a little bit easier to follow it. So, okay, so once I've rotated the canvas and got my artwork square, I'm just going to zoom in and show you the page here. What I do is I'm going to make thumbnails. So I took and copied that page, and I'm going to chop up the different panels of the original strip, and I'm going to resize them individually and drop them in as kind of my background pencils or my background thumbnail drawings for each panel. And yeah, you can see the orientation of this original one. You know, it's got a little bit different sizes going on, so I'm just going to basically rotate and resize these, not rotate, but just resize these for to be in more of a square format. So I cut them out. I'm just cutting them out here, and I'm going to get rid of the edges of the page that I don't need, and separate these out into layers so I can move them around individually a little bit easier, and resize them how I want to. Okay. So I'm stretching the panel height and width to fit the square panels of my new strip layout. A lot of times Photoshop is just juggling around layers until you've got the right order of things. I kind of want this to be underneath the panel layer or the panel borders, so I can go in there and erase things and draw over it when I do my actual thumbnails. And again, I don't know if I've explained this before, I ink these by hand. So I want to do my pencils in Photoshop using an orange pencil brush, and then I want to print them out and then go over and ink these by hand on paper. It just makes it a little bit a nicer process. So this strip was, the idea was Lex is going for a job interview, and it didn't go so well. So he's just kind of, you know, talking to his brother about that, like what happened and what happened with the job interview. I really had a lot of influence when I started doing Guten Tag. I kind of was influenced by Jeff Smith's Bone, and I know that he, from reading interviews with him and things, I know that he was influenced a lot by Walt Kelly's Pogo, and there's other things that I'm thinking of, but just the way that I want to try to get a lot more gesturing and motion, I guess, with the characters. I want to have them. I want to be able to read. Like for this one, I know I wanted to have like more of a read physically of what's going on. He's trying to get the tie off his head, so he's fumbling around with it, trying to get this thing off of his head, and he's not doing a great job of it. That's kind of like the that was the gag that was going through the whole strip, and then he's talking about his skills and how he's skilled and everything, but he can't get the tie off his head. But yeah, the first panel talking about his skills in both dialects of Elvish. That is a reference to Lord of the Rings. And yes, there was a time where I was kind of more of a nerd when it came to that kind of stuff. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And I think the two languages are Sindarin and what is it? Quenya or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the name was. So right now what I'm doing is I've resized all of the panels, and now I'm going over on a new layer, and I am making my new pencil layer for each panel. So I've added things in here. I added the guy's hands in there with the resume, I guess, the piece of paper. And since Lex is going and applying for a graphic design job, it turns out I wanted him to kind of have the job that I have right now as a graphic designer. He's got his portfolio, so he's got that laid out on the table there in front of him. So I am doing this in Photoshop. The brush that I'm using is, I think it's a free brush from a brush pack by Kyle Webster, and it's just like an animator pencil that I think the original opacity or flow of the brush is a lot less. It's a lot lighter, and I just made it a little bit darker so that I can do less lines. But I like how it feels. It feels like a pencil when you're drawing digitally. I want to get a lot of the gesture in the pencils page in the pencil stage, so that I can actually go through there when I'm inking and capture that better. I don't know. I think pencils are a little bit easier for me to get gesture down better. It's just a little bit more free for me, and then when I ink it, I don't have to think too much about it, you know. But sometimes I have to go in there and tweak the inks and fool with them. So I have no shame in copying and pasting things that I've already drawn that are going to be in the same panel in the same spot. I have no shame about it at all if I have to. Anything that will save me time, because it's going to look different when I ink it anyways. It's just the variation of the line is going to be there, so I don't worry about it. I want it to be consistent rather than something new each time, if possible. With objects, that makes sense. With characters, that's always not the case. There's sometimes where someone would just be sitting there and not change expressions, but for most of the time, the characters are always going to be doing something different each panel. So yeah, again, honestly, the inspiration for these characters was a lot from Jeff Smith's Bone. I just like the simplicity of the Bone the Bone family, I guess you'd call them, if they're cousins or something. But um, that's kind of how it started. And then I just along the way, when I first started, they both of my guys, they had like rounded heads, and I just at some point decided to make them more of a flat head just to differentiate them a bit. But I'm not gonna try to pretend I didn't have any inspiration from Bone. It's a good story. I bought like the what did I buy? Because I wasn't there when like the issues were coming out. I wasn't really aware of what was going on. Um, and plus I was young at the time too. I was like 10 or 12 or whatever. So when the collected version, the paperback came out, the like 1,200 page version of it, I found that on eBay and I bought that. And then um, I actually we went to go to China one time and go see my brother that was living there, and took that on the trip to China, and I read that in the whole flight. It was actually really good use of my time being on a long 12-hour flight. But that's kind of where I've got the inspiration of my characters as far as their kind of like overall, just how their eyes, their eyebrows, and how they gesture. I took a lot of inspiration from that, honestly. But I tried to make them, uh, stand out from each other in terms of height and other characteristics and color. So that's the one thing that's different about my strip is this is in color, and they both have two different colors, so it's pretty easy to tell them apart. Plus the height difference. Personality-wise, Lex is a little bit more carefree and clumsy, I guess. Uh, he's more like doesn't really think things through as much, and then Rector is kind of the one that's analyzing everything and sarcastic and also um, annoyed by different things, um, frustrated by different things. I'll speed up a little bit just so we can get through this. I think penciling digitally helps me get this done faster because I can erase faster and try out the motion or the gesture that I want to get here rather than doing it on paper and having to erase and then go back over it. When I first started, that's how I did everything. I just did everything on paper first, and then I'd scan it in at the end and then color it and send it off. But now I'm penciling digitally, printing out the pencils, and then inking them manually by hand on paper, scanning it back in, and then coloring and finishing it digitally with dialogue. So I think this phase for penciling was a little bit faster, just so I'm not spending too much time, erasing pencil on paper. The first 2 years of Guten Tag, it was more of like, Lex and Rector were always kind of like mad at each other and or getting each other getting on each other's nerves, and some of that is still here that I'm working with, but it's not so much, that they're directly antagonizing each other or, fighting against each other. So in this one, Rector's kind of trying to give him his brotherly advice, older brother advice here. I really want to try out either an iPad Pro or another Wacom, or not the Wacom, the Cintiq tablet is like the professional industry standard type of thing for digital comics, but just something that's like, the stylus or the pen directly on the screen, just to get a little bit closer to actual paper. Because, I'm using a tablet right now. I'm using a Wacom Intuos. I think it's a Intuos 4. Or is it 3 or 4? I don't know. It's from like 2009 or something. But it is a tablet that I'm drawing on, and then it's replicating that on screen, and it's a little bit removed from actually just drawing on the surface. So a lot of it is trial and error, drawing and erasing, trying to get the right line, the right movement or gesture. And then truthfully, some of the stuff changes when I ink it. I'll pencil something, and then when I go to ink it, I'm like, that emotion's not right, or the gesture that he's making, or his head right there, right? His head is too tall. I think I actually erased the eye. I caught that, so. So I do change some things from time to time when I ink, but penciling is like I don't know. I would say it's like one of the most important stages. That's kind of your composition's got to be there first, and then inks just make it look a whole lot better. It makes it final. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm trying to move something, but yeah, so I sped this video up a little bit. It's like actually twice as fast, just so I can skip through a lot of the tedious stuff that I've done. But at this point, I don't throw in dialogue. I'll throw in sound effects. I'll throw in things that I want to do by hand, I guess. I actually use a font for the dialogue that looks more believable as like a handwritten font. And I like it because it's almost a condensed font for handwriting, and it works pretty well for the strip, the limited space that I've got to put the dialogue in there. But I'll throw in sound effects like, the herk, he's trying to pull the tie over his head. I'll throw that in there. Other things sometimes like little motion lines or sweat lines or sweat drops or whatever. It also, there's times where I'll do 2 pages. So I've got 2 pages of panels, 4 panels each on a page. And then sometimes I will combine 2 of the panels into like a double wide panel. And I like the freedom that gives me, like just to break up the pace of the story. But sometimes when I go to post it online, then I've got to figure out like, okay, how am I going to do this for Instagram or well, Facebook I just post the pages, but for Instagram I'm doing the panel at a time, and then sometimes I have to like basically make that double wide panel a square. So I just sometimes I'll mess with it, but so at this stage I've got my pencil layers in there, and I'll just go through and kind of like if I need to erase stray lines that are confusing, or if I need to resize or move things around in the panel to make it look best, I'll do that here before I'm done. But I'll turn off my thumbnails layer, and I'll just make sure I've got everything I need for pencils. And I've also got the masthead at the top there that says Guten Tag, and a final gag panel that says the German phrase. And once I'm done, I'll turn off the thumbnail layers, and then I'll go and print each page separately from my printer and go to the ink phase. So that's it. Hope you guys found this helpful. If you liked it, please just like and share this tutorial, and I'll see you guys next time.